So now let us talk about themes that we want to ride when we are talking about green energy or ESG investments. Because when you talk about the term green energy, maybe a decade ago or 2 decades ago, people thought that maybe wind energy would be more important. But what has took a turn is that now solar energy has taken the learning curve to an extent where the cost curve of solar energy has fast outpaced what the learning curve of the wind energy is. So the whole world right now is geared towards manufacturing more solar power because it is more easier to capture, the cost curves are lower, and wind will not be able to match the kind of growth which is going to be there in the solar energy space. And hence, solar becomes one of the biggest themes that we think would define this decade. So if someone has not accessed the video of Tony Seba, I would recommend you to go to the YouTube and download his video on solar energy. And that's a wonderful concept that he introduces about grid parity and God parity, right? Grid parity is what he means when solar power achieved the levelized cost of solar was equal to the thermal power like coal-fired or other, non-renewable sources of energy. And when that was achieved, the solar power demand soared up around the world because it is a cheaper power now than to manufacture maybe the thermal power, at the same time a cleaner power, right?
अगर आप ये वीडियो देख रहे हो तो इसका मतलब ये है कि आप स्टॉक मार्केट ट्रेडिंग और इन्वेस्टिंग में इंटरेस्टेड हो। अगर आपको बहुत सारी ट्रेडिंग स्ट्रैटेजीज सच एज अल्गो ट्रेडिंग, फंडामेंटल एनालिसिस, टेक्निकल एनालिसिस के बारे में और जानना है, देन हेड ऑन टू Upsurge.club, जहाँ पे हमने हर कैटेगरीज के बारे में कोर्सेज बनाए हैं।
The other concept that he talks about is God parity. Now, what is this God parity? The God parity theory that he talks about is that the solar power is now going to achieve a cost which will be even lesser than transmitting a power source to the other power source. For example, the power which is made in maybe a unit of new NTPC, maybe in Jharkhand, if it is transported to a unit, maybe in Uttar Pradesh somewhere, that will have a cost of maybe 50 paise, right? And the manufacturing power cost of that, unit of power, maybe 3.5 rupees, right? So first, what Tony Seba was talking about is that the solar power has reduced to almost 20 rupees in India to 3 rupees, which is at par with the manufacturing cost of thermal power. But now what he is talking about, that solar power would reach to an extent that even transmitting thermal power from one source to the other would be more costly than manufacturing of the power itself. Now this has a very big impact because that means that solar power in a particular geography can be made at 50 paise or lower, which is just the transmission cost of transmitting the thermal power from one place to the other. Now if that happens, the overall offtake of solar in the world would be an unparalleled move in the history, because that has happened with all technologies in the past. And Tony Seba has been the one which called out the EV revolution in the world and was in fact an early investor in Tesla and other EV stocks in the world, and his portfolio has outperformed almost all fund managers around the world. So that is the power which he believes in this decade will be there with the solar energy transition, right? And hence, we in India also, if we have a base of 100 gigawatts of solar, which we are able to achieve by 2023, we have to go to 500 gigawatts, and that is a 5x jump that in India itself we are looking at. And that will require huge investments of close to $100 to $200 billion, which these private enterprises along with government partnerships is going to bring. If you look at the PLI which has been announced by the government, there have been winners like the Vari Energies of the world, the Reliances of the world, the Adanis of the world, cumulatively, who will bring the equipment manufacturing and also execution capabilities in terms of putting up solar, wind and hybrid parks in India, right? So the solar theme is the theme even identified by the government, because the incremental PLIs are not being brought in the hydel energy or the wind energy, but in the solar energy, because that is where, so the government also believes that the cost curve of solar, which has moved to such an extent, would be a far more benefit to the society than maybe concentrating on other forms of energy like the hydropower or the wind power. Maybe a mix of them along with solar would be important, but solar would be the main energy which would be concentrated by the government and the private enterprise in the coming decade, and that's where we believe the opportunity lies.